Hi guys, Mark Dawes in FPS Limited. It's the 21st of June 2013, and in this short video I want to talk to you about a couple of things which are of massive relevance to you if you are a control and restraint or physical restraint or management advanced aggression instructor, or you are someone within an organisation, particularly the NHS or care or education, that commissions training. Now the first thing I want to discuss with you is the fact that the BBC reported the other day that the government is now considering banning the use of face-down prone restraint, and the Minister for Health is championing this cause in cooperation with the mental health charity Mind, because they believe that there is no need to go to that extreme in restraining people. What they're saying is at best it's humiliating, it's degrading, it's upsetting, it can cause trauma and stress, and at worst it causes death. And that's evidenced by a number of deaths which have occurred as a result of people being put in the prone position. Now, many people out there will argue that the prone position in itself does not increase the risk of death, and that's true, otherwise we'd all die if we slept on our front in bed at night. But that, combined with other factors, can actually lead to it. And once again, there is a huge amount of research out there that illustrates this point. The fact of the matter is that what the BBC have uncovered in their research is that there are some trusts that are using prone face-down restraint regularly, an awful lot, and you can see that by going to the link below to the BBC article. Yet there are other trusts that don't use prone at all, but are still managing restraint very, very effectively. Now, we as an organisation have worked with various healthcare trusts, we've worked with various other bodies, and we can basically eliminate the need for people to use prone by putting other control measures in place. And when you come and train with us on our Advanced Restraint Instructors course, or you do one of the online courses like the Online Reasonable Force course or the new Risk Assessment course, which is being launched soon, you'll actually see how that can be achieved. But the important thing for you to consider as a trainer or as a commissioner of training is, under human rights legislation, you have to take positive obligations to promote and protect someone's right to life. That is a basic human right. And because prone is a factor in death in restraint, that is something that you have to eliminate at best, or manage as best you can if you can't eliminate it. And once again, we can show you how to do this stuff. But what I would urge you to do right now is to really, really consider looking at your training programs to see whether or not prone is used and eliminate it from your program. Now today, 21st of June 2013, there are still people out there teaching staff how to use prone in a range of settings, from NHS to mental health and in education and care, where we're dealing with very, very vulnerable children. And we've even seen evidence of this being taught to people who work with the elderly. Now, in this day and age, there are other ways we can do that, and it is absolutely unacceptable. And the research on banning this goes back 13 years to the first draft local authority circular that came out on this issue. So there is no excuse. Now, the other side of the coin is there are obviously people out there who need to be managed in that position, because there is no other way they can do it, and that's been tried and tested, and that they have to do something. Now, if you do have to do something and you have to put someone in the prone position, then there are certain safeguards that you really, really need to put in place. And once again, we can make you aware of those once you come and train with us or do one of our online courses. The other thing I wanted to talk to you about, which actually has an indirect bearing on this, is the fact that the Supreme Court has now ruled that families of soldiers who were killed in Iraq and in Afghanistan can now sue the Ministry of Defence for a breach of their family's human rights and negligence. And what the basis of their action is that the Ministry of Defence, in sending their sons and their fathers and their husbands off to war, have actually been negligent in not providing them with appropriate equipment and appropriate training. And an example of this was the Land Rovers that were used in Iraq that weren't properly modified to actually be blast resistant, and people were blown up in those Land Rovers, and it was proved that the Land Rovers should never have been used in the first place because they weren't fit for purpose, and therefore that negligence in providing those vehicles for soldiers to travel in was negligent and breached their human rights. Now, what's really interesting about this case is that up until this point, the Ministry of Defence had a thing called combat immunity, where human rights legislation didn't really apply in the battlefield, and you couldn't sue someone for the tort of negligence if they died in a battlefield or killed someone in the battlefield, because the argument is it's a war zone and therefore these rules don't apply. But what the Supreme Court have ruled is that, okay, but if you're going to send people out there to do that job and take those risks, is you have to train them and you have to give them the appropriate kit. And if you fail to do that, you're negligent. So this is a massive, massive change in legislation and a massive, massive judgment by the Supreme Court. But what has that got to do with us who are control and restraint, physical restraint, MVA instructors, or who commission training? Well, it's quite simple, really. If we fail to give staff the kit that they need to manage restraint effectively, and if we fail to train them appropriately to manage the risk, and that risk leads to a death, then there's the case for negligence and a breach of human rights. Now, Article 2, brackets 1 of the Human Rights Act, this positive obligation to preserve life that I mentioned to you earlier on, is one of the most fundamental, important provisions of the whole Act of Parliament. It is what's termed as an absolute right. And on the online course, you'll hear lawyers talking about this. And what this absolute right means is that where there is a risk to life, you must take positive and proactive steps to promote and preserve the right to life by eliminating that risk at source. And that's basically good risk management. And this is what our training has evolved around. It's been a core of our training ever since we started. We started applying the Human Rights Act 5 years before the Act came in because we could see the implications of this. So to go back to the first point, if you are using or teaching or commissioning training that involves, at this current moment in time, prone restraint as a primary method of control, then you really, really need to go back and start reviewing your training that you are either delivering or commissioning. Because if there is another way that you can control someone without the need to put them into that position, then you not only have to try it, you have to evidence that you've tried it and show that if you continue to use prone, that there was no other option. And this doesn't mean that at that moment in time, staff felt they had no other option, so they put someone in prone. What it means is that as an organisation, you can evidence that you've tried and tested and evaluated all other options. And these can include equipment as well as training, so it might mean more restrictive techniques, it might mean the use of things like handcuffs, emergency response belts, or other types of equipment, even beanbags we've used to eliminate the need for prone restraint to actually be used in a lot of cases, and it's working exceptionally well. And we have evidence from our own training that it's reduced injuries dramatically. And if you go to the link below, you'll see that other trusts have evidenced this too. So that's all I wanted to get over to you today. It's a very, very short video, but please bear those points in mind. Please look at your training. Please review what you're commissioning, because fundamentally, if you don't, and someone now dies from a prone position, potentially there's a corporate manslaughter case coming your way. And I would think politically now, they're very, very keen to make an example of this. So please, please bear that in mind. For those of you that are interested in looking into this further, then we have an online reasonable force course, and we've just closed the last launch of it, the second launch. We are going to reopen it again very shortly, and there is a lot of information up there legally and otherwise on this issue, as well as a lot of other stuff as well that you can get trained in. And next Friday, we're going to launch the online risk assessment course. And the beauty of the risk assessment course is not only will it teach you how to do a risk assessment, it will give you a lot of advice and guidance on actually risk assessing violence in the workplace, and also the use of physical techniques. So that is something that if you are involved in this area, either as a commissioner of training or as a trainer, I would say honestly, go for that course. We've developed it over years and years and years with some really, really eminent and professional health and safety people, and that underpins all our training. And the key, crucial, important thing for you to bear in mind is if and when something goes wrong, and you have to stand up in a court of law to justify what you did, they're going to want to see the documentation, they're going to want to see the evidence, they're not going to be interested in hearsay. And you can't now get away with saying, well, it was part of the program and therefore we had to teach it anyway because the program has been approved and accredited and we can't change the system. You have to change the system. That is the purpose of good risk management. So if your mandate or your mantra is we can't change the system, then please review your system, because by that very mantra, it's rigid, it's inflexible, and it possibly therefore breaches health and safety because it's not taking into account the different needs of individuals or the bespoke needs of the organisation. Okay guys, that's all for now. There are a number of links below. There's one to the BBC News article about prone. There's another one there to the Ministry of Defence or the Supreme Court, should I say, giving the families the right to sue the Ministry of Defence. And there's another link below to the risk assessment course that's going live next Friday. All the best for now. See you soon.